Hi, Andrew here. Today we're going to take a look at 9mm SIG Sauer 365 115 grain V crown. The 365 line is supposed to be engineered specifically for short barrel pistols. But in my testing, the V crown has had less than stellar results in many occasions, often failing to expand when fired through heavy clothing. So on the one hand, SIG is offering this as being a solution specifically for short-barreled pistols. On the other hand, the V-crown tends not to be a great bullet. At the same time, 115 grain is a little light for caliber, so we should see some fairly decent velocities, granted a short barrel. And that also tends to mean that in bare gel, sometimes 115 grain doesn't penetrate adequately, but on the other hand, those extra velocity might result in decent expansion when fired through heavy clothing. So there's a lot of different moving parts here. It's hard to predict what's going to happen. If you want to pause the video and make a prediction, we'll take your word for it. In any case, let's get out to the range and fire it through my wife's Smith & Wesson Shield and find out what happens.
Okay, this is the easy part. Bare gel, expansion, appropriate penetration. We've seen this a lot before. From your angle, it looks like one track because the other shot is just down and to the left of this one. So from your angle, they look like they're the same, but it's just off that way. Penetration is 15.1 and 15.6. The expansion looks good, although maybe not quite complete. Same story on both of them. They look very consistent. But as always, the real test is how it does in heavy clothing. So we're going to take another 2 shots through 4 layers of denim, and we'll see if this is still capable of expanding after passing through heavy clothing. Sometimes those clothing fibers clog up the hollow point and it prevents it from opening up completely. We've seen that a lot with the V-crown. Let's take a look. Okay, I am Jack's complete lack of surprise. So, I've seen this in a lot of other testing, in various different calibers, various different loads. The SIG V-crown is kind of a mediocre bullet. Does pretty good, okay, in bare gel most of the time. And if it's moving fast enough, it can expand when it passes through heavy clothing, but the expansion is usually somewhat mediocre, and in that case, the bare gel performance sometimes suffers. It's just not a great bullet, and we usually don't see passing performance in both bare gel and heavy clothing. In this case, it's no exception. So, you've seen me do this a few times before. If a bullet leaves the block on one shot, I'll take a couple more shots off camera. Did that again in this case. Took a couple extra shots. We have a total of 3 bullets captured in the gel, and one of them exited here. The penetration on each shot is 22.4, 24.2, and 20 inches exactly. Now, just from those penetration figures, I think you can tell what happened to the bullets. But let's take a look. Well, there it is. Get some of these boogers off of here, and you can see that one side peeled back a little bit, the other side looks almost brand new, and at least that part is somewhat consistent. A little expansion here, not so much here. Same thing here, maybe to a lesser extent. It's just not very impressive. If you were really generous, you could, I suppose, refer to that as expansion. But in my judgment, that is a failure. And because you can't measure all the way across, I would say that that's not even actually really expansion. That's just some mild deformation of the bullet. We can argue about that in the comments or in the thread on the forum, but bottom line is, this is a failure. It exceeded the FBI 18-inch maximum, and there was no expansion. If you have to use this against a bad guy that's wearing multiple layers of clothing, there's a fairly decent chance that the hollow point will clog and it will fail to expand. And that just doesn't mean Canadian Bears or Jay Leno. The 4 layers of denim isn't intended to be a simulation of what a bad guy might be wearing, but rather a worst case example of a lot of closely packed fibers. And this is what can result when you have a lot of closely packed fibers. Several layers of t-shirt, flannel, maybe a leather jacket, any of that sort of stuff can also result in the same sort of behavior.
All right, so the good news is that the velocity is at least what SIG was claiming. We saw about 30 feet per second faster than what they claimed on the website. And it did do pretty well in bare gel. But, and there's always a but, when we fired it through the heavy clothing, that's where it fell apart. As I'd mentioned before, in previous tests, the V-Crown didn't do great through heavy clothing, and this is no exception. Frankly, the V-Crown is not a good bullet, and I have seen it do okay in some calibers where it's just moving fast enough that it can overcome that denim plugging, but generally speaking, it just doesn't do well against heavy clothing. As always, does that mean that this is useless ammunition? Well, no, of course not. It's still live ammo. It still pokes holes in things. And no, a Jay Leno costume doesn't make you impervious to V-Crown. It's still putting holes right through you. The difference is that it's not as effective as it could be, and there are other loads in this caliber and out of a short barrel that do perform well, that do expand reliably and penetrate adequately in both bare gel and in heavy clothing. This isn't one of them. If you have any questions or if you think I got something wrong, definitely leave a comment below. I always love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to make a badass high-speed video like the one you saw in this video, get in touch with Aimed Research. I'll leave their contact information in the description, along with a link back to the discussion forum over at ar15.com. Have a great day.